Hi there, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us today for this APMG webinar, where we'll be trying to answer the question why Agile Change is a great fit for your work. I'm Mark Constable from APMG, and I'm delighted to be joined by Melanie Franklin, who's a regular presenter for us here on APMG webinars. Some of you, I'm sure, have been on previous webinars, so will know Melanie, but for the benefit of those that don't, Melanie's an experienced author, practitioner, consultant, trainer, in all things Agile, project and program management and change management, and she often shares some brilliant advice and know-how on these webinars, so you're in good hands for today's session. Before Melanie gets going, I'll just cover a few bits of logistics, housekeeping sort of things. So the first thing to note is we are recording the session today, and we'll send a follow-up email to everyone that's registered once the recording's available online. Secondly, you're welcome to submit questions at any stage throughout the session. I'll be keeping a close eye on those, and we'll try to get through as many of those as we can with a little bit of Q&A towards the end. Feedback is most welcome, so any feedback on the content or the way we deliver the webinars is very much appreciated. And you'll have my email address from the confirmation and reminder emails. And something that isn't on screen but do look out for in a couple of moments is a couple of poll questions. So we'd like to get your views on a couple of poll questions, which will guide Melanie with some of the content. So should we get going with those now, Mel?
Yeah, that'll be great, because I'm going to take you through the agenda straight after the poll questions. The poll questions just to help me try to understand who you are, so I can tailor some of my remarks to be a bit more useful. So on you go, Mark.
Brilliant. So first one should be on screen now for everyone. So the first question is, does your organisation have a well-defined approach for applying Agile? And we've got a few options there, depending on whereabouts your organisation is. So I'll give you a few moments there. Very few yeses at the moment now.
Three yeses.
Yes. Sorry, very few for yes for the whole organisation.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me, but it's always good to touch base and find out how the world's working.
Yeah, that's most of the votes in. So yeah, 3% yes for the whole organisation, 14% for multiple departments, 28% but for only IT or software-based initiatives, 24-25% no, but it's in progress, and the remainder 29% no.
Okay, right. Okay, that tells us that where we're up to, and now it's all about you, isn't it, this poll question?
Yeah, and the second one's about your Agile qualifications. So which Agile qualification or qualifications do you have?
Thought we better ask. This is, after all, the global qualifications body, APMG International, so it's good to know who my audience is.
All right, quite a mix here too. So 14% Agile Change Agent or Agile Change Coach. 36% Agile PM.
36% Agile PM.
Yes.
Lovely.
And a smaller number for Scrum Master or Product Owner, just 7%. Thought there'd be a few more. 17% other, 25% none.
Okay, all right. Well, welcome to the group, everybody, including those with no Agile. Don't worry, you're not expected to know anything about Agile, because this is all about how we might use an Agile change approach. Agile change, what on earth is that? Well, it's basically how do we try to make change happen in an organisation, creating not just tangible change, you know, like solutions, new processes, but also the behavioural change, the new ways of working. How do we create that in an iterative way, a very agile, flexible way, responding to changes in our environment as we go? So that's all you need to know, really. I'll take you through the rest. I thought that I would look at this Agile change approach from very much the challenges that I'm very lucky that my clients will tell me quite bluntly some of the biggest problems. And these are also the problems that I experience when I'm trying to make transformational change happen in an organisation. I've been at work since around 6 o'clock this morning. I had calls for hours this morning with different clients on their changes, and I was in calls late last night. all saying the same issue. So I've pulled out the 7 most common issues that seem to be the problem. Please feel free to put things in the chat whether you've got other issues as well that you'd like me to add to the list, and we can address some of those. Mark will happily pull them out and tell me what they are, and I can add those to the list, or you can pose them in the questions towards the end. Use the chat function for telling Mark what's going on, and if you want me to say more about something, or you've got a particular issue you want to add, please do so. I'm really interested. Even though it's a webinar, I really want to make it as interactive as possible and make it relevant for the things that you're interested in. But these are the most common challenges across goodness knows how many conversations. So I'm going to get straight into it and show you how an agile change approach sort of addresses all of these. So the first one is, we know we're in a world of uncertainty. We don't need to just watch the news at the moment to see how uncertain the world is. We know how that uncertainty plays out within our organizations, because there are so many shifts in direction, whether it's a change of personnel and you've got somebody coming in with all of their new ideas. There's a change of personnel where somebody that was leading the charge has now disappeared, and maybe you're a little bit rudderless because there's no real sponsorship of what you were doing, but there's no real replacement of it. We've got changes because technology is changing and there are new things coming in, and we're thinking, oh, we ought to do that now, we've got something else happening. So there are a lot of changes taking place. So the thing is, a more traditional approach, what we would do is we're going to brainstorm everything we need, all the requirements, define the time and budget based on our planning, and then get approval of that detailed plan. And the time for doing all of that planning up front, all the detailed planning up front, is significant. And of course, what happens is we can be talking for weeks, sometimes months, about what we're thinking of doing. And we cross-check the requirements with lots of different stakeholder groups, make sure we've got that complete sense of certainty. I know exactly what's required now. And then we go off and plan it. So we've got that in front of us, and it looks good. It looks like it's a detailed plan. And you think, fantastic. The problem is we've waited a very long time to even get started, and what we're going to deliver is that complete solution at the very end. But in an uncertain world, does that really stack up? Is that how we want things to be? Maybe it would be better if we just did, hang on, what's the end goal? What are we trying to get to? What's the big picture? What's the big idea that we're aiming for? We're trying to become more digital. We're trying to become more customer centric. We're trying to become more innovative. Whatever the big idea is, right? Okay, now let's just plan the first capability, the first outcome that will get us on the path to that. And then let's get started. So we start creating things earlier in the cycle. We have got less of this flabby sort of planning piece that has to be resourced, has to be paid for, but doesn't actually deliver any value in its own right, just creates a plan. It says what we hope to do. So let's get on with getting stuff done earlier if we possibly can. So I've laid out that agile roadmap of new capability after new capability. The other thing we have to recognize, I think, this uncertainty, is that what happens is the world changes. So we don't just plan once. In an agile approach, we bake that in from the very beginning. We recognize that we need to replan. So we put in, after every outcome or capability has been created, after everything new has gone into operational use that we've created so far, we replan. What's the next bit? We replan. What's the next bit? We replan. That makes perfect sense, because what we're doing is we're taking the temperature of what's happening around us. We're bringing in the feedback from what's happened so far, and we're deciding what's the next thing to do in quite an accurate way. It's a very proactive style of planning, really, and it makes perfect sense, because the alternative is we plan reactively. Oh, change is coming on top of us, whether we like it or not. I need to shift things. Oh, something else has happened that we weren't expecting. I need to shift things. oh, something else, something else. And of course, what you can see happening here is that towards the end, we have all of those additional things that have pushed us out in terms of the time frame and in terms of the activities. Oh, I've just lost my animation. Hang on a sec, I'll put it back. We've lost, that original deadline. We've lost that original plan. We've got that chunk of red on the end there, where we've added in extra activities, because we're still sticking to the, I'm going to complete everything. I'm going to give you the perfect solution. So that's what we end up doing. I had an experience of this myself the other day. I've been working with a group of people last summer on their 3-year strategy, and we had lots of workshops and we talked about things. Over a period of time, we were exploring alternatives. But in September, we confirmed what that strategy document was. We put all of our best ideas in and we described how the organisation was going to be in 3 years. I kept sort of raising the flag that, things are going to change, guys, but we still had something that we put in front of our senior leaders. Well, in March, I sat down with a big cup of tea one Saturday morning and read it, because we'd been going for 6 months, and I thought a 6-month review would be a good thing, applying this Agile as I've shared at the bottom there. And what was really interesting is that even though they were very clever people, and even though their decisions were driven by evidence and data that they gathered, 20% of that strategy just really didn't make any sense anymore, had been overtaken by other events, had been overtaken by newer ideas that had come in that seem even more workable. Now, the remaining 80% is great, but 20% of it no longer valid. So I thought about this and I thought, well, what if we lose another 20% in 6 months' time and another 20% after that? And if you work through that, you lose 20% of your 80%, takes you to 64%. You get the joke, you keep going. And actually, after 3 years, that original 3-year strategy, only 25% of it is likely to be valid. And actually, a lot of other events would have overtaken us by then. So it kind of makes sense, I think, when we've got that big uncertainty, to talk about our longer term aims, yes, what our goals are, what we would like the organisation to be able to do, but we need to keep it light because we need to get in there quite quickly and get things up and running. And we also need to make sure that we plan the replanning and give that real consideration for the horizon scanning and the soaking in of the feedback to make the best next right decision. That's really what we're doing. I think also that we're under pressure to deliver, to get things in front of people really, but we're also under pressure to make a difference. So I'm going to take those sort of separately. The first thing when we're under pressure to deliver is that I need to show you I'm getting there, things are happening. Because there's so much going on. There's 2 reasons I really need to get in there and show you things are happening. One is that as my senior leadership team, you're nervous. There's so much else happening that, have we made any progress yet? If things are moving fast. So are you making progress at the same speed? And the other thing's quite pragmatic. With so much else happening, I feel the need to get in front of people and say, hey, we've done this now, and now we've done this, before they forget that we exist and we're sort of yesterday's news, and the latest change is the thing that's taking everybody's attention. So I think there is a bit of a battle there for people's attention. And the thing that concerns me about a more traditional approach, where I'm setting out every single activity I'm going to do in that Gantt chart along the top there, it's a lovely logical progression. But as I don't deliver anything till the very end, it's a journey. And all I can do on a journey is update you about where I've got to in the journey. So effectively, what I end up telling you is, hey, I've done this, I've done that. I tell you about the activities I've carried out. I tell you I'm really busy. But I can't give you anything, because I don't give you anything till the very end, when everything is right, and I'll give you the complete solution, not an interim solution. But that might make you wait a year or so There's a good chance some of you won't be around in a year or so. I never had a chance to make a difference. I never had a chance to impress you. I never had a chance to solve any problems because I kept you waiting for that big, complete solution. Alternatively, with my more agile roadmap, what I'm going to concentrate on is chunking up what you need into smaller standalone solutions. You know, new capabilities, you know, these outcomes, they are actually mini solutions. They fix a particular part of the problem. They offer you a particular opportunity for doing something that you can't do at the moment. So what I'm able to say with that is I'm saying, hey, here's an achievement. Here's something that didn't exist before. And I'm doing it frequently throughout the life of the initiative. And it's something that's gone into operational use. So it makes a real difference. So it really convinces people, hey, this is good. I think we're making sense here. Hopefully this is starting to convince you, yeah, that this is the way forward. Because I think there's something else. I'm not just under pressure to deliver. I'm under pressure to make a difference. How do I make a difference? I just talked about a shifting capability. I'm offering you a solution. I'm offering you an opportunity to do something you couldn't do before. Well, what that means, what I really like about this agile change approach is it brings together two worlds. It brings together the solution, the creation of the tangible change, and it brings together the creation of the new ways of working, the behavioural change. Effectively, if you're going to deliver something that's a capability, something that can go into operational use, something that really makes a difference, what you're doing is you're building both the plane and the runway that it can land on. Too often we concentrate on building the plane and then think that the runway will magically build itself later on. Agile change cuts away from that and says, no, we've got a set of activities, project management, product ownership, development, Scrum, whatever methodology you want to use to create the solution. But at the same time, we're partnering that with a behavioural change life cycle where you get people interested and feeling positive about adopting new ways of working, creating new ways of working, and you take them through that life cycle and you get on with that. And then you repeat that for the next iteration and again for the next iteration. I think that this agile change approach, because it's bringing together both those worlds, that is how we create benefits. Benefits upfront, making a real positive difference. And I think the other thing that really excites me about an agile change approach is that we start to ask ourselves, have we created benefits? We start to measure those benefits from the end of every iteration. Now, you can't see all benefits straight away. I can't see a massive cost reduction immediately we start working in a new way, but I can measure usability. I can measure the number of people who've started actually using the new system, putting data into the new system, stopping using old systems, stopping using old ways of working. Really getting into that very early on. So that's what I like, that I'm actually there up front making a difference, and that my clients get more comfortable with this because they can see, yeah, she shifted the dial in a very positive way. There's not just loads of talk and activity. Yeah, we can see that things are different, and we might be chunking it up for parts of the solution, or we might be chunking it up for parts of the organisation that we're delivering it to. But somewhere there is a concrete positive change that has happened, and we haven't had to wait months and months for it. It's relatively swift. Every couple of months I can actually make sure that a shift has happened. And to be honest, before people lose interest, before people lose momentum, I think there is something in there about, you know, that pressure is also the pressure not to lose people's attention span, whether they're senior leaders who sort of authorize what we do or the people affected by it. You know, if we spend too long talking about what we're going to do but don't actually get anything in front of people, They stop listening, and their attention is taken by other things that are happening. So I think this is a survival mechanism in a very fast moving world. I'm not sure that this is a choice anymore. I think this is an essential way of doing things. I think that brings me on to something else, which is that it would be really stupid to disengage my audience. And I think, having worked in a more traditional way of doing things for a good 20 years and spent the last 10 years working in a more agile way, I am very aware that problem with the more traditional, gather all the requirements up front, do all the detailed planning, you set out that plan end to end with every single thing sorted in a logical order. So you do this before you do this, and then you do this before you do this. It all looks great, and it actually sort of gives you that end-to-end sort of certainty. But there is a problem with it. And the problem is that it's almost like a fait accompli. It's like it's a pre-packaged job that you can't influence at all. You're kind of stuck with it. So the perception is that activities are happening to us, that there's no clarity on this plan about what we'll get. What we know is that there are stopping off points where we can summarize our progress, but it's all activities. We've got to do this, we've got to calculate that, we've got to present this, we've got to code this, we've got to put the data in this. There's lots and lots of activities happening, but there's no actual delivery. So all it's telling me is all the activities that are going to happen. And also the implication very strongly is that the order cannot change. You are stuck with this is how things are going to happen. However much they don't fit with the business pressures that you're genuinely experiencing and the things that are happening in the marketplace, you're kind of stuck with this is the plan we're going to deliver. And of course, it's all work, but no reward, because the reward is at the end when you actually get the solution. But up until that point, you're basically being, if you're in the business, you're being hit by a whole load of things that people want you to involve yourself in, answer questions about, and get involved in. But, you know, you're not seeing any payback. You're not seeing that your job is easier to do. You're not seeing that a process has been sort of streamlined, something's been automated, a difficult job's been taken away. You're not seeing any of the improvements to the big problems and failures that customers complain about. You're just being told, well, you know, things are in progress, and that nirvana is going to come, but it's going to come, after the summer. It's going to come by the end of the year. So there is a lot of opportunity to disengage the people we need to participate in our change initiatives. Whereas when we start to look at a more agile roadmap, because the emphasis is on early delivery of a solution, early delivery of something that shifts how people work, then I think the perception is very different. Well, first of all, people can understand what's going on. They can see it's in small chunks, so they can collaborate. If they miss the chance this time, they know that in the next chunk of work, they realize, I want to have my say about that because that really affects my job. So they feel that it's more collaborative rather than, hey, here's a complete plan, this is what we're going to do to you. This is about doing it to themselves. I think it gives you clarity about what will change. So important when you think, yeah, okay, so this is what I'm going to have available, and this is how we're going to be using it. That real understanding, that ability to think, so for me, that means on a Wednesday morning, I don't need to do that report, or that's going to get me a couple of hours back. Okay, well, that means I can get on to some of that other stuff I've been meaning to do. People can start to picture themselves in the new world. And they're encouraged by this roadmap to do it because they can see that there's a new capability coming quite soon. So it's not wasted effort to imagine themselves in that new way of working, unlike the plan above, which might be another year before they have to shift. Well, no point sort of trying to imagine how that's going to feel and how that's going to work. It's too far out. The brain doesn't work like that. When things are too far over the horizon, our brain just says, waste of effort to engage, can't imagine it, not going to. Whereas this more agile change roadmap gets you in there pretty early. And it also means that the order of the work responds to feedback. So it gives people a sort of sense of ownership, really, because they can see that if they've got something to say about this won't work at this time, our customers are really busy at this point, they can see that they have an opportunity to say what needs to be said and shape what's happening. And of course, what we've got is we've got early and frequent rewards, because we're actually changing how things happen quite quickly. They can see that, they're experiencing it because they're adopting those early and frequent new ways of working. So I think there is something here about agile change naturally, organically engages the audience that we need. The people who have to work differently are our real audience. That's who we need to attract. And I think this is what happens there. I think something else that we need to always think about is that too often we're not fully crewed from the very beginning. What happens is that we focus on the tangible solution that's going to happen, and we'll pull people together, whether or not that's project and program managers. It might be that you're in a more agile world, although not judging by the poll questions that you came back with, but those who are might have product managers, product owners. You've got people who are doing IT development and software testing for you. You might have certain consultants or specialists who are coming in to create a new target operating model for you. Whatever that tangible change is, we've got a sort of well-worn group of people who are actually doing that creation. The point is that what we need to be thinking about is, hang on, we've got to create the new ways of working. And that means we need people participating in those new ways of working. And we won't get that participation unless they feel positive. And they won't feel positive unless we've got their interest, we get their attention, we get them feeling interested about it. But there's a whole group who are going to take themselves through that sort of transition from current to new ways of working. I think we ought to engage them. So we start to think about, now, I could do you an entire pyramid going all the way up through the hierarchy of an organization. But the 3 levels that I picked that are really important, that there are line managers, department heads, for example, who really are sponsoring the creation of a new way of working in their area of the business. They know that there's this new enterprise-wide system, or they know that there's a new target operating model, and they have to make sure that everybody who works for them, every function, is actually working in that new way. Now, they might have that responsibility. They might take on maybe the role of being a sort of agent of change and really championing that for their team leaders in each of the teams that report to them. The team leaders themselves have got to lead their team through the process of creating and adopting new ways of working. They've also got to lead themselves through that process of adopting the new ways of working. They themselves, therefore, probably acting as a sort of change agent, but they might also be a subject matter expert who can advise on the workability of what's being created. So again, a really important group of people who can feed back to those creating the tangible change to make sure that that solution absolutely is workable, practicable, can be used. And then, of course, you've got team members, some of whom might be subject matter experts, some of whom might be the super users that we train up to take others through this. But it's making sure that we consider from the very beginning, do you know what? We don't just need the people who create the solution. We need from the very beginning to partner them with people working in the business who know how things are working, and actually they are going to be the ones that put this into operational use. If you've got both parties, then you can have genuine collaboration, because the people creating the solution can give early insight, demonstrate what they're creating and what their thoughts are, and the people who are going to have to use it can talk about how it will work in practice, how they're having to change their processes, what considerations they've got to share with customers or suppliers. They make it real, in other words. So you're making something, but you're also making something real. And it's the combination of those two together. Now, in Agile, we often talk about this one team culture. And I love that idea. I love this collaborative environment. What worries me in practice is that we're not collaborating because we haven't called out specifically those people in the business we need. They are the other part of the team. They're actually usually the larger part of the total team that delivers change. The solution creators are a small specific group that do their work. This is the group much bigger in the business, currently trying to cope with business as usual, and we also want their involvement at the same time in this initiative. But it's the two together that actually deliver. That's what we're looking for. And in fact, that earlier diagram there shows, if I just go back to it, that's what we have to have, both the solution creators and the people creating the new ways of working. That's how we make a difference. We've got to have both in every chunk of our initiative, whether you call that an iteration, an increment, a wave, a tranche, a stage, doesn't matter. But for every chunk of our initiative, we want to be able to go live, put stuff into operational use. That's incredibly difficult to do if you didn't create the new ways of working at the same time you created the solution. There we go. Mark, I know you're going to collect up all the feedback in the chat, but if anybody wants to sort of say, hey, you're not answering my particular challenge right now, just put it in the chat. I am happy for Mark to give me questions and let me know that you want certain things addressed. But hopefully I'm hitting some of the things that you're also seeing and that you're experiencing. Any feedback, Mark, in the chat that I should be aware of? Am I hitting the right notes, or do people want something else from me?
Yeah, there's various challenges put forward. So do you want a few of those now?
Well, I'm going to do, shall I do the last couple then, and then get on with answering the questions? Probably using the same diagrams, guys, but I'll certainly try and answer all your questions. Mark's very good at reading all the chat, assimilating all the points, and then putting excellent questions to me. So I'm just giving him a little bit of time to do that. I think talking about those people in the business who are creating the new ways of working gives us a thought, which is, you know, there are many demands on those common resources, because however important I think my change is, I think mine is the most important in business. Of course, there are lots of other initiatives in the portfolio. There are lots of other projects and programs that are demanding sort of subject matter expertise from the business. We need them to take part in testing. We need them to take part in shifting how they're going to do their work, changing templates, making announcements to customers, stop using spreadsheets, start using this system. There's lots of things. So I'm not the only change initiative in town. So I need maybe something quite practical that perhaps reassures people that they can still get involved without it absolutely crushing them. And I think the Agile Change approach does that, because we've got this plan of each of our capabilities, and what I can do is then divide that capability into more specific new ways of working that are going to be needed. One of the things I love about Agile Change is it's all about breaking down from the big idea, not building up from individual requirements. And I think that is the secret to its success, in that it makes perfect logical sense to people. You've got the big idea, the big shift. We want to be more customer centric. And then you can divide that into individual capabilities. And then you can divide that capability into individual new ways of working. And then you can sort of actually show that we're going to spend the next kind of couple of weeks a couple of months trying to shift how we deal with customer inquiries online. Perhaps that might be the thing. And we've got a process where we can hive off a little bit of time to sort of brainstorm all the things we need for that new way of working. Then we can sort of spend 6-7 weeks actually creating it. And then we can hold back a couple of weeks while we maybe train up all of our colleagues, make sure we've properly explained it to the customers, and start working in that new way. So then I can take those couple of months and I can give people a sort of, we're going to spend sort of a week in brainstorming. We're going to spend sort of 8 weeks making all of the adjustments, and then I'm going to spend a week just tidying it up at the end. I can give you a sort of 10-week plan almost of what's going to happen. And then I can get even more specific. I can sort of say, hey, we're going to divide up all the new way of working into specific tasks and activities. You're an expert on some of the legal considerations around use of data. You're an expert on how we calculate the financial return. I need the legal expert in sprint 1. I need the expert on finance in sprint 2. I can get quite specific about how I need to use your time. So I'm not wasting it. I'm not asking you to sort of be on standby when, frankly, you've got lots of other calls on your time. So I'm treating you with respect. And I think when we're in the business, we need to treat our colleagues with that respect, because, you know, they're thinking, you know, what happens next? They need to know so they can plan the use of their own time, because they've got a full-time job already. So laying out a plan that actually specifies when they're going to get involved and what it relates to, really helpful. And then the last one I'm going to do that particularly obsesses me at the moment, because I've got a big transformation going on with lots and lots of initiatives, is that if I look, busy diagram this one, if I look at the top level and I've got sort of 6 initiatives that are running on that more traditional piece, what I'll get is updates on all the activities that have happened and what's about to happen next. But that's different to seeing the sort of achievements, the outcomes. And therefore, when I'm trying to work out, you know, what are all the interconnections, and oh no, that needs to go first and that needs to happen next, it is incredibly difficult. There is an agile approach called Scaled Agile Framework, SAFe. Some of you might have heard of it. And they basically talk about, at the end of every few months, they call I call it an iteration, they call it an increment, but at the end of every few months doing something, we should get together and do what they call the planning increment, basically planning the next couple of months. And you end up with charts like this and you just want to cry, because you're trying to work out, well, okay, John, if you do this, this, this and this, Farah, if you could do that, then that. Oh, no, Farah, you'll have to do that bit first because John needs that before he can get on with his stuff. Oh, no, Emma, what did you say you wanted? And you end up in this horrible mess. It is so much cleaner and clearer for everybody when we talk in capabilities, that we will have delivered this new service, we would have delivered this new way of working. People would have shifted from using that Excel spreadsheet, so that's been retired. They're now using that common platform. So they've got rid of those forms, they've got rid of those spreadsheets. You can see much more clearly how the interdependencies play out. And having used both approaches, I promise you the bottom one is so much clearer, and it just enables people to have what I think is more intelligent conversations about what has to come first and what has to come next. It's almost as if the one above is just that little bit more micro, and it's just much harder to see which activity from your project should go before my activity on my project. Whereas here we can sort of reshuffle the new ways of working into a logical order, and therefore much more easily manage the interdependencies. Well, that's been my experience anyway. So those, I think, if I go back through all of them, we're talking about interdependencies, we're talking about demands on common resources, we're talking about not having everybody we need in place from the very beginning. We can't afford to disengage our audience. We know that we've got to make a difference very early on. We're also under pressure to deliver things that people notice early on. And we've got a huge amount of uncertainty that we're dealing with. And so maybe it doesn't make any sense to plan in detail up front. So those were my 7 challenges. I'm now going to hand over to Mark, and Mark's going to sort of tell me what it is I need to do next.
Yeah, well, there's very much a winner in terms of the most common one that's put forward, and this it tends to be the case on every session we do, and it's all about culture. So the challenge where the culture isn't right for Agile, or the senior management maybe aren't receptive to it.
Yeah, and I think this is what the argument I have to win culturally, guys, is absolutely this one more than anything. I think if you can get senior leaders on board with this is where you've got to win them over, that they're going to get something that they want very early on. And this is why I love Agile Change, because it really helps me win the argument. The thing is, you see, although I can show you there that there is quite a big planning cycle, and therefore I'm funding all that chit chat and all of that going back and forth over the requirements, and I'm sounding disrespectful of it, because there is a lot of discussion and there's a lot of hypothesizing, but I have to wait a long time before people actually get up and running and start delivering something. Now, if I flip back to a previous career where I was the CEO, I'm funding that entire cycle from left to right on this screen. I'm funding the whole thing until I get something. So you'd think, why on earth wouldn't you want to move to an Agile way then, Melanie? Because it doesn't look like a good idea. But the thing is, first of all, the human brain, we like requirements. We think pretty well in requirements. We think like a shopping list. Oh, I want that, I want that, I want that. So we quite enjoy the requirements gathering process, because we're able to have our say. And we say, oh, don't forget, it's got to be in that colour. And oh, don't forget, it's got to be, we've got to have that information attached to it. We're really good at being specific and saying what we want. So there is some reassurance around that process. People enjoy it. And the second thing that works against us in an Agile world is that plan, that more waterfall sort of Gantt chart, well, actually, although we all know that it's going to have to be replanned a lot, and in fact, we sort of know that it's going to end up with all of that extra stuff at the end, even though we know that, it's done it again. Even though we know that, it looks good. You see, the thing is, just take some of this stuff off for a minute. That Gantt chart looks good because it's shown me, an end-to-end plan. That looks like you know what you're doing. We know that it's going to change and probably deliver late and over budget. But initially, it looks good. And I think the argument we have to put forward is, we have to describe that uncertainty, and the reason I gave you that story about the strategy being 20% off even within the first 6 months, is that I'm sure you've all got examples of that, where you wasted time delivering something that's now obsolete, when you miss the opportunity to deliver something that's a new requirement. So I think you have to sort of say, if we're planning for this one single delivery at the end, and we're trying to define it in absolute detail right now, I think you need to start using that. Well, a large percentage of it will not be valid by the time we get to the end of it. I wrote that up in LinkedIn, by the way. You'll see it's one of my articles very recently. So if you haven't connected with me in LinkedIn, do so. I'll accept the request and you'll be able to see that article. Because I wrote it so that you could all use it as your own examples of why an Agile approach is more useful. It is the danger of trying to be certain in an uncertain world. I also think we can do a lot around culture, about talking about the difference between being busy, and so I'm going to go to that one, being busy and actually delivering actual achievements, real shifts. Now, there's lots of models where you can show early return on investment and how, therefore, we get a much earlier payback. We can talk about, therefore, the net present value of the money we've saved or the revenue we've gained very early on. And I would encourage you, if you're not financial type person, find somebody who is, to do those models for you. So if you're saying that you're saving half a day a week of somebody's job, and there's 10 of them in the team, you're saving 5 days a week. Well, their average salary is £420 a day. You know, it doesn't take long to work out the real value of that. But with raging inflation, which, let's be honest, none of us have really encountered very much in our lifetime. But, you know, when you've got inflation running at 7%, a friend of mine did this, looking at salaries. And if you are earning a salary of 32,000, do you know what? Raging inflation of 7% means that that goes down to, I think we ended up calculating it was something like 30,200 or something. You know, you'd lost a couple of thousand off your salary in real terms. Well, if that's what it looks like for you as a salary, think what it looks like for your organisation as either a revenue or, in fact, cost saved. So I think there's quite a lot we could do about, do you know what? We can't afford to fund this entire busyness bit. We need to start bringing in those savings or that revenue increase really early now, because raging inflation makes a big difference. I hope I'm role modeling that there are lots of examples from around the, you know, our real world that you can use to make the argument that waiting and waiting for the complete solution is very, very risky in a world where the likelihood of that complete solution being wanted is almost zero. Yeah. And that actually what we want is something initial that makes a big difference. Does that help a little bit on culture? I don't know if anybody's put anything else in the chat where they want to question me a bit more on that, or if you've got another example you want me to address, Mark.
Yeah, we'll head to the next one, and it's another one that's come up a few times. So the culture stuff was more about your own organisation, I think, but the next points that I'm seeing a lot about bringing clients along on the journey. So, you know, adapting the way they work with you, and, you know, having it be part of more regular feedback. Let me just going to bring up this particular one from Hannah. So she works in a software house, and I can't say they want Agile, but I struggle to get the time we need from them on an ongoing basis. They tend to fizzle out after the first month or two. And so any advice there?
Yeah, I think the first thing I do with that is I draw this kind of visual, and I am incredibly explicit, Anna, and I point out that they are going to be asked to contribute regularly to feedback. I want their time so that I can demonstrate stuff to them. I'm going to want their time so that they can actually create their own new ways of working. And having drawn this visual up front in one of the very early meetings, and I encounter this all the time, it's why I've come up with my techniques for it. What I get people to do is I actually get people to turn to their Outlook, their calendars, and we start booking those things in. We can use this kind of agile planning to be predictive about when we're going to do things, and we can agree timings around, look, I don't know exactly what I'm going to demonstrate to you yet, but I know that I'm going to demonstrate something to you on Friday the 13th of May. Yeah, I know I'm going to demonstrate something to you on Friday the 27th of May. You know, I can get in there with stuff, and actually getting them to book it in their diaries, Anna, that's what you want to do. And I think there's the other thing here is that I spend a lot of time trying to reduce down the time I need from the client by making sure that I've maybe devised the demonstration I want to give them, and I've really thought through in advance the questions I want to ask them, and I maybe prime them with that beforehand, and I really try to narrow down the amount of time we're together and make it as active as possible. What I'm not going to do is take them through lots of sort of updates where, frankly, I'm just not sure that I'm keeping their attention. What I will do is I will restrict my client time to stuff that I need them to do for me and stuff that I am giving them to use. And in that way, I think I keep them a bit more motivated. But definitely lay out the visual end to end for the next 6 months and get them to put it in their diaries. If it's not in the calendar, it doesn't exist. And other people will take that time away, and then they'll tell you they're too busy, and it will fizzle out, definitely.
Great, thanks, Mel. Another one that's come up a couple of times is inadequate experience with or lack of awareness of agile methods. I'm not sure if that's sort of within your own organisation or with clients as well. But how do we go about addressing that?
Well, I think the reason I wrote the Agile Change Agent course initially was to widen out availability of sort of an explanation of Agile without getting into all of the methodologies around Agile. Because I think that often sort of stops people getting involved because they think it's all just for IT and just for software. And I think too often that inhibits people, and what I really need is I need as many people as possible to understand this agile approach, and I want to take them further than just think, oh, it's very flexible, or we don't plan stuff, we just work in sprints. I would like to put a little bit more meat around those bones, and I think explaining a lot of what we've just talked about here about the fact that particularly that when we're working on something, we want, where's my diagram here, that we want both groups involved, or that I want to sort of explain that actually, you know, we are bringing together the tangible solution and the behavioural change, the new ways of working. There are some key things that I think if you can get training that enables people to get the bigger ideas about Agile, then they start to really get enthusiastic about it. And I think that is the way to build the capability within your organization. Sheep dipping everybody on a Scrum course when that's not really their job doesn't help. It just makes them think, oh, there's another language out there that I don't really understand, and then they sort of shy away from it and disengage. So I think giving sensible messages is why I do these webinars, because I really hope that sometimes you can share some of this webinar, some of this recording with some of your own teams, wherever I've sort of given a sort of sensible, user accessible explanation of Agile. That's what I'm interested in doing, because it's taking everybody with us and not just saying, Agile, something special that group over there do. I think that's where you'll get more people on board, and people have a greater awareness of what you're trying to do, and you've got more people you can work with.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Where are we? 5 minutes or so, so maybe one or two more. I'll go with a specific one. What does Agile do differently that other change approaches don't to help companies deploy change in a sustainable way?
I think probably the first thing I'd grip onto is that often when you've got change management methods and models, they talk about the behavioural change piece, which is great. They talk about the emotional cycle of change. So a lot of people use the grief curve from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, talk about shock, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, and then experimentation. They might use a William Bridges model of endings, neutral zone, new beginnings, or something simple like Lewin's unfreeze, change, refreeze. They're all great, don't get me wrong, but what's missing is that you've got to partner it with the tangible change piece. If you have one and not the other, then you don't get benefits, because you create something, but you've then got to be able to use that thing, and it's the use of it that creates the benefits. Getting that new ways of working was always what change management was about, getting people to shift how they do things, their behaviours, so that the organisation works differently. But we know that it's triggered by tangible change. But if you see the worlds differently, then they don't meld together, you don't get the benefits. Agile change was always written from the perspective of bringing together the solution and the new ways of working.
Okay, great, thanks, Mo. I think we've got time for one more. So sometimes there are some initiatives that cannot be delivered in chunks of capabilities. The reward only comes at the end of the initiative. How do we manage those in an Agile environment, if indeed we do manage it with Agile?
I do, because that I get stuck with that a lot. What happens is that maybe that we've commissioned the creation of something, and in a quite a traditional way, so that the contract is written that they've got 18 months to deliver something, whether it's let's say it's a new platform, it could be a new building, it could be anything, but they've got 18 months and they're going to deliver it, and there is no reward until the very end. but I think you can create the reward, because if it's almost like this diagram's different in that the solution doesn't come to the very end, but down the bottom you can still chunk up the new ways of working, because what you do is you prepare for what's coming in 18 months, and you start preparing now, and you start shifting how you do stuff, knowing that there's going to be automation of this thing, and there's going to be this new product that's available for customers. So you think about what's coming, even if it's a long way down the track. And one of the first things you can do is you start to think, do you know what, with all these new things coming, maybe one of the first shifts in capability we could do is we could have a really good streamlining and sort of tidying up of how we do stuff right now, and get rid of stuff that really won't be valid in the longer term. Let's start to streamline how we do stuff. Let's behave differently almost before we've got the thing that generates that new behavior. Let's go early, if you like, and I think you can do that really, really well. So if I've got a traditional delivery of the tangible solution, I can still create new ways of working in a very agile way, even though I know that I haven't got everything right now. I think I've given this example to some of you when I've been training some of you, but this happens to be, I'm getting as a complete solution, I'm getting a new HR system. One of the things that will be coming though is there is an app for every staff member, and they will be able to swap shifts with each other when the app arrives. It's not there yet, but we've decided that that's such a big shift in behavior that they don't have to just tell their supervisor that they can't make their shift, and then it becomes the supervisor's problem. They actually will go out to their buddy, and hopefully their buddy will cover their shift, and they'll cover their buddy's shift another time. Well, we've definitely been playing with that, and we've done it on spreadsheet and with WhatsApp. And the first iteration of it, we realized that we had everybody partner up with somebody who had different sort of domestic arrangements, and maybe if you have a childcare crisis, you're partnered up with somebody whose kids are already at university, for example. But we did that, and iteratively we realized that I mean, it is a bit harder on spreadsheets and WhatsApp, but we did it. And then what we realized was that actually you don't need 1-to-1 buddies, you need 1-to-3 buddies. And then that works really well. So we piloted that instead on our second iteration. So we've been learning about behavior change, even though the platform that really supports that isn't available yet. But hopefully that brings it to life for you.
Yeah, thanks, Mel. And we're running out of time, so we better look forward a few slides so we've got further.
I know he's got his end slides. I'm going to put those up, but if anybody wants stuff from me, you can get hold of me through LinkedIn, and I will share things with you quite happily.
Yeah, great, thanks, Mel. And great content again, and yeah, there's a few links there on screen to check out, and Melanie's also already talked about the Agile Change Agent course that over there, so do check that out, and we'll include these links in the follow-up email as well, so do look out for that.
I have written this up as a paper that I will make available to you tomorrow, Mark. I will review it, because I always review the paper after I've delivered the webinar. But basically what the paper has got is I've copied in the slides, but underneath that I've written some of the key points I've made. So instead of just getting sent the slides, you get sent something that's slightly more useful, which is an actual document that reflects what we've said. Brilliant.
We'll include that in the follow-up. Okay, so just leaves us to thank you all very much for attending. I hope you've enjoyed the session. I'm sure you've got lots of valuable information. Melanie's always great with that. So, and as I say, just look out for the follow-up email. We'll get that out tomorrow as soon as the on-demand version's online. So thanks very much again, everyone. Thanks, Mel, and enjoy the rest of your week and the weekend ahead.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye-bye.